I grew up in a small, quiet town where nothing much happened. It was the kind of place where you know everyone's name, where the most exciting thing in town was the annual talent show held in the park. That park was our pride and joy. Big trees, green grass, a peaceful little spot right next to the train tracks. There's a stage set up there, and if you're sitting in the audience, you're looking directly at the tracks behind it. Every year, the talent show drew a big crowd. It wasn't that our town had an abundance of talent, but more because it was something to do. It was tradition, you know? A time when the whole town came together to see their neighbors, their kids, get up there and sing, or dance, or juggle, whatever they had in them. This one year, I'll never forget, everything seemed normal. The weather was perfect. Families were spread out on picnic blankets. Kids were running around, and people were talking, laughing, and just enjoying the evening. You could hear the faint hum of the train rolling by in the distance, which was normal. The train passed the park pretty regularly, and after so many years, you didn't really notice it anymore. It was just part of the background. That night, I was sitting with my friends, waiting for the next act. The sun had just set, and the stage lights were coming on, casting this warm, golden glow over everything. It was peaceful, almost too peaceful. The show was moving along nicely. Some singers, a couple of dancers, even a magician who wasn't half bad for a local act. Then, the next performer came on stage. I didn't know him personally, but I had seen him around. He was one of those people who sort of just blended into the background, always quiet, keeping to himself. Nobody really paid much attention to him, but that night, he had signed up to perform. He walked onto the stage, and I remember thinking he looked off. Something about the way he moved. He was too calm, too collected, like someone who had already made up their mind about something. He stepped up to the microphone, adjusted it slightly, and then he just stood there. Silence. Everyone in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, waiting for him to start. But he didn't. He just stood there, staring out at the audience. The silence started to stretch out, and you could feel the tension rising, this sort of collective unease settling over the crowd. Then, out of nowhere, he turned around and started walking toward the back of the stage. At first, people thought it was part of his act. Something dramatic maybe. But as he kept walking, it became clear something was wrong. He stepped right up to the edge of the stage, looked back at us for a moment, and then he jumped down onto the tracks. Time seemed to slow down. Everything went silent, except for the distant sound of the train horn, getting closer, louder. I can't even describe the feeling in the pit of my stomach at that moment. It's like everything inside me froze. I could see him standing there on the tracks, just waiting, staring straight ahead as the train's headlights came into view. People started yelling. Some even ran towards the stage, but it was too late. The train didn't stop. There was no time for it to. It hit him with a sound I will never forget. A sickening thud that echoed through the park. And then nothing. Just the rumble of the train as it passed, leaving behind silence in a scene no one was prepared for. People were screaming, crying, some in shock, just standing there. It all happened so fast, but at the same time, it felt like it was happening in slow motion. I couldn't move. I was frozen in place, staring at the spot where he had been standing, trying to process what I had just witnessed. The talent show came to a screeching halt, of course. People were rushing to their cars, gathering their kids, trying to leave the park as fast as possible. But even as I sat there, unable to move, I knew that no one was going to forget what they had seen. That night was burned into all of our memories. For weeks after, the whole town was in shock. Everyone had their theories about why he did it. Some said he'd been struggling with his mental health. Others thought it was some kind of statement or protest. But the truth is, no one really knew. No one could understand why he chose that moment, that place, in front of hundreds of people to end his life. I guess we'll never know what was going through his mind. But I'll never forget the look on his face just before he turned toward the tracks. It was this strange mix of peace and despair, like he had made peace with his decision, but was still carrying the weight of whatever had driven him to that point. Now, every time I go to that park, I can't help but look toward the stage and beyond it, to the train tracks. They're just there, silent, unmoving, but forever a reminder of that night. I don't go to the talent show anymore. I don't think I ever will again. It's strange how one moment can change everything. How a place that once felt so familiar, so safe, can become a haunting reminder of something you can't unsee. I still think about that night sometimes, about the man, about the train, and about how none of us really knew him, but now we'll never forget him.